to another very special edition of Sessa's Corner. Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to the return of Sessa's Corner. I know we've been a little bit on hiatus, but yours truly, I am back, and I am so proud and honored to introduce my guest for this special edition of Sessa's Corner, the one and only writer extraordinaire, the one and only Paul Castiglia. Paul, welcome to Sessa's Corner. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to sit down with you today. We have this opportunity, and I'm very grateful. Welcome to Sessa's Corner, my friend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, Paul, we've met just really over the last couple months. We're now both members of the Flying Deuces, which is a chapter of the International Sons of the Desert, the International Laurel and Hardy Fan Club, which as many of my viewers may recall, one of my prior episodes of Sessa's Corner was a spotlight on the International Sons of the Desert, and specifically the tent that we belong to now together, the Flying Deuces. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last couple of months or so, and in doing so, we've had some great conversations about your career and what you've done in the past, what you do currently. And folks, I think it's more about what this man has not done versus what he has done. I mean, when we talk about writers, and there's so many great writers of all different genres all throughout the world, but ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you that I'm sitting with today one of the best that's come down the pike. And yes, Paul, don't be modest, my friend. Don't be modest.
You're too kind.
And folks, let me point out right here, Paul Castiglia for many years was, without question, the brains behind Archie's comics, along with writing some nonfiction books and a variety of other things along the way as well. And we're gonna kind of chronicle some of this and kind of take us through this fabulous career that Paul has had, that is still ongoing and evolving to this very day. And in addition to being an accomplished comic book writer and editor, Paul has also been involved with some filmmaking, and he's also a published and accomplished songwriter as well. We're going to touch on all of this. So folks, make yourselves comfortable. Again, let's welcome Paul to Sessa's Corner. And Paul, let's kind of take us back to the beginning, if you will. Take us through your journey.
Sure.
How did it all begin for you?
Well, I'll tell you. But before we go too deep, I do have to walk back the brains behind Archie Comics comment, because Archie Comics has always employed an army of writers. So I had my time at Archie, which we'll talk about.
Yes.
But I cannot lay claim to being the brains behind.
Well,
it,
definitely one of the brains. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I had a good time there. But for me, I was destined to do the things I do. I do most of the work I've done in my career has either been aimed directly at kids or has something to do with humor. That's been the majority of my work. And like I said, I was destined, because from the time I was 4 years old, I remember sitting in front of the TV watching Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear, and I was drawing them in little notebooks. And those notebooks are still in my parents' attic, I believe. I should dig those out and take a look at them. And I was coloring them with the accurate colors, with colored pencils. And like from the very beginning, I was just entranced by these images of comical characters that I would see. And part of that, too, was Laurel and Hardy. I saw Laurel and Hardy from the age of 4 or 5. I'm not quite sure what age it was. I'll be turning 57 in a few weeks. So you figure this is the early 1970s. And I'm sitting there watching TV, and I think it was Channel 5. I don't know why that sticks in my head.
Yep.
But it was an animated cartoon short, Larry Harmon Productions, Laurel and Hardy, like a 5-minute, and then a 2-reeler, which is film jargon for a 20-minute short, and live action of Laurel and Hardy, and I was hooked. I was hooked from the beginning. So those guys just blew me away. It wasn't long after that I also discovered Abbott and Costello, and those two duos are my favorite comedy duos. Laurel and Hardy are my all-time favorites, but Abbott and Costello are like right up there.
I couldn't agree
very
more.
Close, and I
Couldn't
love
agree
them both.
more.
And it was just a joyful childhood of growing up with a whole bunch of animated cartoon characters, comedians. From Laurel and Hardy and Abbott Costello, then I discovered the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges and W.C. Fields. Typical of kids in my age range, we were getting the TV guide and looking in the back where all the movies were listed and circling when all the comedians were on. And if you had to kind of figure out a way to sneak yourself awake with an alarm clock at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. to see something, you would do it. And back then it was prevalent. Back then we had local TV stations that ran classic TV shows and classic movies. They were never presented to us as being old, antiquated, outdated. Black and white was not a dirty word. It was, these things are just entertaining. And it was through watching these films that I learned about puns, and I learned about satire, and I learned about spoofs, and all kinds of comedy and literary types of functions, ways to write things. And so I just knew, like, from the time I was a kid, I wanted to be involved in these types of things, specifically comics and animation. Bullwinkle was a huge influence. With comic books, my local library had a book called The Great Comic Book Heroes, written by Jules Pfeiffer. And what he had done, he was a famous, humorist and author, and I think he's written some screenplays. And I think he was also a cartoonist. What he had done was he reprinted 1940s comic book stories, mostly origins. He had Batman in there, Superman. He had Captain America in there, the Human Torch. But then he went deep, Green Lantern, the Atom, the Spirit. And he had a character in there called Plastic Man, and Plastic Man blew me away. So when you talk about things that had a huge impact on me, Laurel and Hardy, Plastic Man comic books, Bullwinkle cartoons, these things, Tex Avery cartoons, animation, all the great things that Tex Avery directed and his writers wrote, these are all huge influences on me and my outlook on how to do comedy. And sometimes it's a bit deep, sometimes,
of course,
like Laurel and Hardy, for example. Like, if you look at some of those films they made, there's a touch of Charles Dickens.
Oh yes, definitely.
There's a touch of Beckett. There's a touch of Shakespeare. They're these two guys in a lot of the films. They're almost, like they say, babes in the woods, where they're in a world they don't fully understand. And so how do they get through this, right? So it's just wonderful for a little kid to be shown that.
Absolutely.
It's another reason why I love Pinocchio, the original Disney feature, because that film showed that, there's some crazy stuff and even some tough stuff in the world, but if you persevere and if you're kind of heart and good of heart, you can find a way through it. I think Laurel and Hardy had a bit of that too. And in Plastic Man comic books, Jack Cole was the writer and artist of those. He would put adventure, action, romance, comedy, social commentary and satire, sometimes horror and science fiction, all in the same story sometimes. And, I started collecting those comics when I was a kid. We'd go to comic book conventions, my dad and I, and we would go on a Sunday afternoon, and it was like almost closing time, and he'd go to the dealers, and we were talking about 1940s comic books, and I'm buying them in the late 1970s. So they weren't quite as pricey as they are now, but they were still a little pricey. But he would end up, making deals where it's like I'd get 3 comics for the price of 2, because these guys wanted to pack up and make a sale at the end.
Of course, yeah.
And so I grew up looking at all of that. That library was a gold mine. I came to learn later Well, there was a guy named George Erling who still lives in the town of Pompton Plains where I grew up.
Oh, nice.
He was an underground cartoonist, but he worked at the town library, and I'm almost certain that he was the one who ordered the books for the library. There was also Super 8 films, Laurel and Hardy, Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello,
Yes.
that I used to borrow and play on a projector because of that library. There was old-time radio on cassette at that library.
Absolutely.
And record albums. And I'm pretty sure it was because of George Erling. He also taught a cartooning class there when I was a kid. So I learned a lot about cartooning from him. So yeah, all of these things kind of collided, you know. And when you get to the music part, I think I kind of have, I love all types of music, but I have a particular reverence for kind of jumpy jazz and swing and also ragtime. And a lot of that was, here's what I'm hearing on the soundtracks, the Laurel and Hardy shorts,
Yep.
and Little Rascal shorts. And then the Sting movie comes out, and my dad and mom go to see it, but I'm too young to see it. But they bring home the soundtrack, and I'm like, I want a piano, I want to learn how to play. So that's how I learned music, and I started learning Scott Joplin songs. So it's just this kind of explosion, you know, a bomb cyclone, so to speak, as they say.
All came to a
in
head.
weather terms, where all these things collided, and they influenced me, you know. And so, long story short, I pursued the cartooning, you know, route more than anything else.
Yes.
I dabbled with music on the side, but I ended up going to School of Visual Arts in New York City. I majored in animation and I minored in cartooning. When I graduated, I realized I didn't really have perspective, anatomy, and composition down as well as I needed to compete with my fellow graduates. So I had to think fast. I'm like, wow, you know, you know, a lot of money just went into this education. So I thought, well, I like to create stories, and I think visually. You know, what I learned from college was how to tell a story visually. And so to think about it in those terms when you're writing it. So what I did was I put together a portfolio of picture scripts. And basically they were like thumbnail versions of comic books. They were better than stick figures.
Yeah.
Not polished enough to be published as artwork. But you knew who all the characters were and you knew what was going on. And I ended up getting some freelance work from DC for their Looney Tunes magazine. About a year after I graduated, maybe about a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half. A former teacher of mine at School of Visual Arts was editing that magazine, and I dropped off my portfolio with him. He remembered me. He's like, I like this, I want to give you a shot. So November of 1989,
takes one shot.
Yeah, November of 1989, I made my first sale to DC Comics. You know, I remember getting the check, and I had the check. I think, I'm trying to remember now. I think my girlfriend.
Did you frame a copy of it?
I think my girlfriend at the time, if I'm not mistaken, had a color Xerox machine at her place of work. She was working for a costume and seasonal novelty company.
Okay.
And I said, can you make a copy of this check? And so, so I kept the copy of the check, you know.
As you should.
Back then, you deposited checks and you really never saw them again. But, so that was the start. You know, I went on a few interviews to try to be an assistant editor at Harvey Comics and at Marvel Comics and at Archie Comics. And the Archie one was the one I got. That was the job I got. I started at Archie in January of 1990. I stayed on staff at Archie through April of 1999. And then I continued to freelance for Archie for several years after that. I lost count. It might have been another 17, 18 years after that, or 16 years.
Fantastic.
That I kept freelancing for them. And while I was at Archie, so this is the Archie part. So while I was at Archie, I started out as an assistant editor.
Yes.
I was brought on to help put together the Archie Americana series, which was a series of books spotlighting each decade in Archie's history and reprinting classic stories from each decade. And that was great because I got to research all of these comics. They had most of their library bound.
Okay.
the Animas bound volumes. So they would take like a year's worth of issues and then have a hardback binding put on them. And they had a library of these things, so that was my research.
There you go.
And
Yep.
I was finding the first appearances of characters, the development of story elements like the famous love triangle, and it was great. And eventually I became the editor, not just the assistant editor on that series. And we did those, I think, 12, I want to say we did 12 volumes altogether in between 1990 and I forget when we did the last one, but I know it was a span of 20 years that we did them. So long after I had left the staff position, I was still putting these books together for them.
Absolutely incredible.
And so that was great. I also got to write comics for them. I got to write for Little Archie, which was like a younger version character of Archie and his gang. I got to write for regular Archie. I got to write for Archie 3000, which was Archie in the future. And also, the thing I loved most was Archie's Weird Mysteries.
Yes.
And Archie's Weird Mysteries was based on an animated series. Now, when I was on staff at Archie, I wore a lot of hats. I wasn't just,
I could imagine.
I wasn't just a writer or an editor. They would get me involved in development for anything like outside media, movies, TV, because I had the historical knowledge. They'd get me involved in licensing. I was involved with retailers, distributors, writing press releases, writing catalog copy. I gained my copywriting skills, which served me well to this day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Through doing that work with Archie. So since then I've always had one foot in the creative writing of stories and the marketing writing. But
the best of both worlds.
yeah, and as I was helping them develop this Archie's Weird Mystery show, it was Deke Entertainment. And they came to me and for some advice on the characters and their personalities. And, I was providing them a reference. And I said to the head editor there, I said, we need to do a spin-off series so it's not just a cartoon on TV, but we have a comic book series to go with it. And I said, I really want to write this. I love this stuff. I said, look, I love Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. I love Kolchak the Night Stalker, which was the famous TV movie and later became a series. There was a movie from the 80s called Night of the Creeps that I really loved, which was practically like Archie, facing off against monsters. And I loved all these things. I'm like, I want to write this. So, they gave in to me and said, yeah, go ahead and write it. Have a blast with it. And oddly enough, a funny story is that
they gave you the green light and then,
yeah, we went for it. But oddly enough, the funny thing is that the show was on a little network called PAX, which was very short-lived.
Yeah, I remember that vaguely.
Yeah, well, everybody remembers it vaguely. And that's the point. What happened was it went on the air on PAX, and it ran for 4 months. And we put out our comic book, and by the time the comic book came out, because there's like a 3-month period from the time you actually, conceive a comic book to the time it's published.
Of course, yeah.
3 to 4 months. By the time the comic came out, that show either went off the air or was about to go off the air, right? So, but the comic book was popular. Yeah. So it kept going for about 2.5 years, right? Somewhere along the line, I think issue 24, the editor comes to me and says, the show's been off the air for a while. Sales are starting to dip a little bit. Can we do something else? Can we take the weird out? Can we just make it Archie's Mysteries? Can we just take all the paranormal and supernatural? Because I had them with aliens and ghosts and Bigfoot, all in a fun, lighthearted way. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do. And then with a funny conversation, it was like, make it more realistic, like Scooby-Doo. And I'm thinking to myself, there's nothing realistic about it.
I was going to say, that's...
and I was always very much against any comparisons between Archie's Weird Mysteries and Scooby-Doo, because at the time, Archie was facing a real alien or a real monster, and Scooby-Doo, it was still, a guy in a costume that was trying to rip somebody off out of their inheritance money or something, a crooked landlord or whatever. And so, anyways, ended up doing it as kind of a CSI type of thing. But long story short, the irony of it was that as soon as the first non-weird issue came out, that Archie's Weird Mysteries TV show went back on the air in syndication, and it never left. It's still on. It never left.
Talk about perfect timing.
So yeah, I mean, so we had another 10 issues left in us before it got the plug pulled on it, but it was a great run. 2.5 years and 34 issues, the longest run I ever had on a comic book title. So I'm really proud of it and happy with it. I had a great,
as you should,
great artist, Fernando Ruiz, working on that with me. Other things at Archie, I got to write and edit some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics.
Yep.
I got to write and edit some Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic the Hedgehog, yes.
So, I mean, these are all great things. A lot of other characters that I was involved with behind the scenes. There was a lot of behind the scenes work with licensors who owned, other characters. And even things like we did a crossover with Marvel called Archie Meets the Punisher, which was a brilliant one-shot comic that a writer named Batten Lash, he passed a few years ago, unfortunately, was a wonderful writer. And it was the closest thing I've ever read to conveying the same type of motif as Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because he treated the humorous characters and the serious characters with the same reverence. So that's, I mean, we watch Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yes.
It works because the monsters are serious. And Archie Meets the Punisher and those characters are serious, and Archie's still Archie, and it's brilliant. So I got to work behind the scenes on that. It was just a wonderful time.
I can only imagine.
And eventually, it ended, but I kept freelancing for them, like I said, and in fact, most of the Archie's Weird Mystery stuff I wrote was after I had left the staff position and had become a freelancer. But that was the Archie story, and then I transitioned to work for Mattel Toys, and that was a 21-year journey. And I got to work on a lot of different types of toys: preschool toys, vehicles like Hot Wheels and Matchbox, action figures, even some dolls and things like that. So all types of brands: Disney, Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers.
You name it, you touched it, basically.
DC Comics characters I got to work with on toys. Thomas the Train, I spent a lot of time working on Thomas the Train, including writing some animation scripts. And ultimately, my work at Mattel, in the beginning, I started as a copywriter for their packaging, but eventually they realized, oh yeah, this guy has done other stuff. He's done comics. So eventually I was writing, special, giveaway stuff for them, like storybooks or comic books, and then animation shorts with Thomas. So it really just kind of kept going.
As it should have. I mean, once they saw, what you brought to the table, what you had done, and the talent that you came in the door with, obviously they wanted to capitalize and utilize you in as many different areas as possible. And now let me ask you this. So, how did the Mattel toy opportunity come along? So now you finished up with Archie, like you said, and how did the Mattel thing come up to begin with?
I was looking for something else to do for a variety of reasons. I was looking to leave that staff position for different reasons at Archie, and I noticed that there was an ad in the newspaper. Back then, it was an ad in the newspaper for a division of Mattel, which was called Arco Toys, out in Long Island.
Okay.
And it was very close to where my girlfriend at the time was living, and I thought, oh, this is a chance to move closer to her and work on toys and see what I could do in that field. And so, it was just a great interview. A guy that's dear to my heart also passed on, Phil Arndt. He was the guy who hired me. He had interviewed a lot of different copywriters, people who had like actual product copywriting experience, which I didn't have at that point.
Yeah.
But he saw something else in me. I think the fact that I had worked on characters for Archie, and I'd done both, marketing, copywriting, and storytelling for Archie, really spoke to him. But also just we got along really well, we had a conversation like you and I are having now.
Yeah, you guys just hit it right off.
Where we started talking about movies like Army of Darkness with Bruce Campbell, right? And just like laughing about that. And I think that it was like he was thinking chemistry with the team.
Yeah.
Chemistry with him and chemistry with the team. And I took that lesson later on when I had to hire people. And that's the approach I used when I hired people. So I think it was a good approach.
I would agree.
I was in Long Island from April of 1999 to March of 2020. And then Mattel had gone through some changes. They had bought an electronic learning company and it didn't work out too well. And they had to appease the shareholders. So what they decided to do was they had a division in New York City called Tycho Preschool, which had hit big with Tickle Me Elmo, right?
Yep.
You all remember that.
Of course.
And they had us in Long Island doing these, what they called non-promoted toys. They were kind of the flanker items, we called them. They would be on the shelf next to the main items. And here's what I mean by that. So in the Long Island division, we were doing accessories and kind of extra toys for Barbie, Hot Wheels, Matchbox, but they weren't the TV advertised ones. So there would be a big TV advertised Hot Wheels set that year that was coming out of California.
Okay.
But the additional cars, the carrying case, additional track pieces, whatever, was being done very inexpensively through the Long Island office, and it was like direct freight. It's hard for me to explain what that is, but it was a process by where it could be sent into the country inexpensively, and you didn't have to advertise it because the idea was the parent would go to the store, they would be there to get the big set. They saw their kids saw advertised on TV, and let me get them this carrying case too while I'm here. And so the Aqua division was making money hand over fist.
Yeah, I can imagine.
However, because Mattel Corporate had to appease shareholders, they came up with this plan to take a bunch of us from the Long Island division and smush us together with people in the New York City division and make a new division. And that's what they did. So I was one of the people that got transferred over to New York City. I still stayed in Long Island for a few years after that, and ultimately moved back to New Jersey, which is where I'm from originally. And then it was 18 years in New York City, working for Mattel, mostly on preschool. Eventually, they closed that New York City office.
Wow.
They transferred me to corporate headquarters in California in the fall of 2018, and I was there until May of 2020, when there was a big layoff due to the pandemic.
Oh.
They were uncertain, how it was still early. It was still maybe about 2 months in.
About 2 to 3 months into the height of the pandemic.
They still were not sure what was going to happen.
Uncertain times.
And everybody who got laid off, or I'd say most people got laid off, were people that had time put in.
Oh, of course.
So it was just a business decision. It was like, how do we, get rid of some overhead? And of course, if you're there for 21 years, you're in that echelon where you might be making a little more than somebody else.
Absolutely.
So it was no hard feelings. They were great about it. They had a great outsourcing service to help you write, which was great because remember now, I hadn't written a resume in decades.
I could imagine.
So this outsourcing service was helping with resumes. So, it took me about over a year and a half. It was a year and 7 months before I got work again. But in the interim, I picked up some new freelance clients, some more toy companies, which has been fun. I have a few companies that I work for, like Razor Scooters. Every now and then they have me do something for them. I wrote a couple animation scripts for one toy company. There's another toy company out of Hong Kong that has me doing all sorts of like story backgrounds for their action figures. So it's a lot of fun. But I ended up getting work now. I'm a year in. My anniversary was January 5th with a streaming company called Minnow.
Yep.
And what it is it's a streaming company that has animated shows and live action shows with a Christian religious bent to them, and it's very well received. The shows are great; they're a lot of fun. I'm working for them as a copywriter, so I do a lot of marketing copy for them, a lot of emails, ads, different promotional pieces. But I've also written some content for them, and I have a couple show episodes that will be out probably around Easter.
Okay.
For a show called Coco Talk.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, and a few other things. So I'm still getting to write, kids content, and it's great. So that's kind of the journey of kid stuff. I mean, there's been other comic stuff along the way. I co-wrote a book called The MLJ Companion with Rick Offenberger and John B. Cook, and that's a book about the early history of Archie when they only did superheroes in the late 1930s. And those characters throughout the ensuing decades, the superhero characters. That was a great project. A few other things like that. I contributed, now in the film history realm, I contributed a chapter to a book about Vincent Price.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up. As a matter of fact, it was part of the Midnight Marquee Actors Studios, and you contributed the one on Vincent Price, as you mentioned. And
so I got so for that book they had different authors write about different films, right? So for my chapter, I naturally chose the films that Vincent Price did with Peter Lorre, because to me, when I watch those, they're like Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello, the way they interact in those films, especially The Raven and The Comedy of Terrors. So, it was again this fascination with the mixing of horror and comedy. And to me, it's there's this line. It's a very thin line between screaming and laughing.
Absolutely.
It's like a hairpin, right? So I love exploring that. So it got me thinking too, why not write a whole book on those classic horror comedy films? So in 2009, I started writing this book called Scared Silly. And this book, I recently procured a publisher for it. I still have a couple of years to go on it. I have to finish it. But it's basically my reviews of shorts and features from the 1920s to the mid-60s. And so it's, of course, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, the Little Rascals, the Three Stooges, the Bowery Boys, Bob Hope, Don Knotts, on and on and on. If they got mixed up in spooky situations, it's going to be in this book.
The Dead End Kids, the Little Tough Guys, the East Side Kids, I believe that's also part of it.
Well, yeah, the East Side Kids and the Bowery Boys, they each had entries with spooky stuff. East Side Kids were with Bela Lugosi a couple times. I also got to help out on the documentary about those performers you just mentioned. The Dead End Kids, who became the Little Tough Guys, who became the East Side Kids, who became the Bowery Boys. That project is in flux right now. I think they're looking for some post-production funding. So there's not much I can say about that other than...
It's an upcoming documentary, I believe called The Bowery Rhapsody, The Rise and Redemption of Hollywood's Original Brat Pack.
That's the working title.
Yeah,
I really don't know the current status, but hopefully that will get finished someday. There are a lot of good interviews in there with family members, children of those actors and grandchildren, as well as people that were inspired by them. So the time I got to spend working on that has been a great time.
I could imagine.
But the other thing, it has been speaking at movie screenings.
Yes,
and
you are a member of the and a part of the Great West Orange Film Festival, and I had the pleasure this past week of attending the screening of the restoration of the Abbott and Costello classic feature Jack and the Beanstalk. And you had the pleasure of introducing some key folks at that one. And how long have you been a part of the West Orange Film Festival?
Well, let me go backwards a little bit, because my whole journey with that started when a fellow named Brian Solomon out in Connecticut became a fan of my Scared Silly blog, because part of my Scared Silly book is putting up some reviews on my blog and some other things of interest in horror comedy genre. And he reached out to me and said, hey, I do film screenings in Connecticut of classic films. Would you like to speak? And I went to Connecticut a few times.
Yeah.
I spoke at Castiglia Frankenstein.
An offer you couldn't refuse, right?
Yeah, I spoke at, I think one of the double features was Castiglia Frankenstein and Young Frankenstein, and the other was Mad Monster Party and The Nightmare Before Christmas. So I got to speak at these, which was great. And that kind of got me jazzed up to do more of that. So, I noticed that my friend Michael Uslan, who is a comic book writer, editor, and also a movie producer on all the Batman films, local Jersey boy, done well, made good, and a good friend of mine. And I said to him, hey, I saw you were speaking at this West Orange Classic Film Festival. I'd love to do that. How do I do that? He's like, oh, just call Ken Mandel. He gives me this fellow Ken Mandel's number. I meet with him over, what's that place in West Orange? It's a kind of an overlook bar restaurant that's overlooking everything, and you can see New York City from there. I forget now what the name of it is, but I meet him there one afternoon. He's like, hey, you want to talk at the shows? I'm like, yeah. Told him what I wanted to do. I said, I really want to do the popcorn movie, especially comedies. You guys have a lot of classic films that you run, but you don't always lean into that. I said, and they're just as classic as anything else. Even if they're not the critically acclaimed films, people remember them. And you know what? It was an idea. It was time to come, because once I started doing that, those shows, for a number of years, those were their highest selling shows.
Yes.
We did Castiglia Frankenstein one year. I did a recreation of a movie matinee with a Popeye cartoon, a Flash Gordon movie serial chapter, and Laurel and Hardy's Flying Deuces. I did Mad Monster Party there.
Talk about turning back the clock.
Hold That Ghost there with Abbott Costello. Did a double feature of the restored The Music Box and Way Out West with Laurel and Hardy. And Buck Privates.
Two of the best. Three of the best.
I wanted to do Laurel and Hardy again this year, but what happened, bringing us up to this year, was that we had an opportunity to have the New Jersey premiere of the restoration of Abbott Costello's Jack and the Beanstalk through my friend Bob Furmanek, who was the one who spearheaded the project through his 3D Film Archive company. And we were going to do that as a standalone screening. But the venue that we use, which is the AMC Multiplex Dining Theater in West Orange,
Essex Green,
they were going through a renovation, and it was like a moving target. We couldn't get them to commit to a date. So then we started talking, well, maybe we should fold it into the festival for 2023. And then I started thinking, that's a good idea, but it's really going to stick out like a sore thumb, because it's not even the regular type of Abbott Costello movie we show.
Yeah.
It's a very unique film because it's a fairy tale and it's a kid-targeted movie. And so I said to the committee, I'm like, we really need to do a whole theme around fantasy and legendary stories. And we, came up with this great program. It's been terrific. We did The Adventures of Robin Hood. We did Jack and the Beanstalk. Yellow Submarine is coming up. Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast fit perfectly. We try to get a foreign film in there because we have a speaker, Gerard Amsalem, who is a scholar on foreign films and teaches it at colleges. So perfect. The Cocteau classic, So
I couldn't agree more.
Field of Dreams, Willy Wonka.
It's
and,
a tremendous
Princess Bride. It's all ahead. So Jack and the Beanstalk seemed like a natural, And if we did the film in a different year where there wasn't Jack and the Beanstalk, it might have been Babes in Toyland, March for Wooden Soldiers, Laurel and Hardy. But it just happened to be we ended up doing Abbott Costello 2 years in a row. I want to get back to Laurel and Hardy with a shorts, with another series of restored shorts. That's probably another 2 years away because we have another theme we're thinking about for next year.
Okay.
That wouldn't really fit the classic comedians, but it's a good theme. But stay tuned for that.
Oh, I can't wait. And we had a full house practically this past Sunday for that Jack and the Beanstalk restoration.
Let me tell you.
It was a lot of fun.
I was so happy with that, and this brings me to a point I want to make, which is, I'm not, no man is an island. I'm not a one man show. Everything I've done in my career is because there have been other people involved, collaborators, people to support me, people to encourage, people to have other people to have ideas, editors, managers, artists, and so it's not ever a one man show. And I was more than happy. Usually, I would speak at West Orange Classic Film Festival. I was more than happy to turn over the reins to this particular screening
to Bob. Yeah.
To Bob. And as I said at the beginning of that, I missed an opportunity for a joke I wanted to make. I forgot about it, but I was like, Bob should run this, and Ron Palumbo, who co-wrote the great book Abbott and Stone Hollywood, plus Bob's great people, Jack Stixton and Ray Fiola, who worked on the video and sound restoration for the film. I wanted them to speak on it, and I wanted to say in my upfront to that, and this is what I forgot.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, the only reason that I've been able to speak about Abbott and Costello films at all is because of this great book these guys wrote, and they're here today. I said, so now, this is what I wanted to say. So now, instead of hearing it from the horse's ass, you'd hear it right from the horse's mouth. But I forgot to tell the joke. So now this is my second.
Well, you made up for it here, right here on Sessa's Corner.
This is my chance,
and that's fantastic.
But again, so I just wanted to get that out there. That's it's all about collaboration for me.
Yeah.
I'm very humble in that regard. There's things I like to do on my own, but I found that a lot of things are improved when I let others into the process, and it's always a great experience. So I've just been fortunate. I'm blessed. I'm fortunate to have had the opportunities I've had. You could say I have a certain level of talent. Yeah, that's true. I guess it's not just that for me. It's the enthusiasm for loving the things that I love.
The passion behind it.
Being able to do the things that I love, to play in the sandbox, and also to have great playmates. Those other people I mentioned.
Absolutely. And let me say this. So now, we talked about the books and the comic stuff and the film projects and what have you, and overall the journey of your career, which is still obviously ongoing and ever evolving. But I want to touch on the 4 songs that you did have published, if I may, and I wanted to just take a moment to kind of highlight those. Under the stage name of Paul Cast, you did get 4 songs published through Broadcast Music Incorporated.
Broadcast Music is the royalty firm, but I'll talk about that. One of those songs,
Scott Lee Productions.
Scott Lee Productions. Yes. One of those songs on that list I don't think was ever officially published. I think that's an error there on the Wikipedia readout that you're looking. But I'll talk a little bit about that. Those songs. Yeah, I kind of thought, maybe I could be a rock star when I was in college. And I went down. I had a few songs in my head. I composed them. I went down. I'm trying to remember the name of the town now. A few towns over from Pompton Plains, heading out that Dover way, probably close to where you live. And now I can't remember the name of the town. Went to a little studio there and recorded a demo. I had my guitar with me. That's all I had. The guy who recorded the demo for me, he played the drums and other guitar parts of the bass. And one song was like a power pop song. The other song was kind of like a punk metal hybrid. And the other one was a more like a rockabilly, classic Chuck Berry type of thing. And, kind of comical lyrics in some of them, except the punk, the punkish one was more like Angry Young Man stuff. Like when you're young and idealistic and you're in college and you look back after that and you're like, wow, some of those lyrics are naive. But that song, I took the 3 songs to this fellow Scott Lee, again, an ad somewhere in probably one of the music papers that I used to pick up from Sound Exchange record store. Um, and I answered his ad. He was over in West Patterson at the time, and he liked my demos and wanted to produce a record. He chose the one song I didn't want him to choose, which was "Cutting Loose," which was the kind of punkish metal song. But he took it and he made it into more of like a Billy Idol, Robert Palmer type sounding song. You know, my voice is not great. You know, studio magic makes a voice sound better. I could never really replicate it live. And one of my tricks was that a lot of times I would do what they call an overdub, a double track. So I would go through the song once, sing it in a kind of a raspy voice, and go through it again, sing it like an Elvis type voice. And when you put those two together, it makes kind of a neat sound. But I can't duplicate that on stage because it's two different styles of singing. So anyway, the record came out. It got some airplay in Australia, of all places. So, you know, it did okay there from what I understand. It never really made any dent anywhere or made any money from it. But I did get some play in local clubs. WDHA rock station in New Jersey played it. I think Long Island played it on their radio, if I recall. But, you know, that kind of came and went. You know, I kind of lost interest in the music thing. You know, I tried it again with a ballad, which came out on a compilation of New Jersey artist that was on a cassette. That's a really pitchy performance. I cringe when I hear it now. Kind of schmaltzy too. But, you know, after that, I've been involved for a number of years with a fellow named John Mark Grode, who's a cartoonist and an illustrator and also a commercial artist. And he has this great property that he developed called Friendfish, a children's show. And a number of years back, I wrote a theme song for that. He has kind of a newish version of it now that some other writers took and kind of took to another level. But it's based primarily on what I had done on that. And I'm still involved with him, and he's taken that project. That project has gone through a lot of stages of potential financing, and he's on the road again to potentially being financed again, which is good stuff. So
excellent.
I help him out whenever I can, you know, with writing needs, whether it's marketing copy or story copy. You know, I wrote another song for one of his stories in that series. I don't know if he'll ever produce that story, but it's called the Big Eye song about a big eye fish. So that was another one we just recorded on the side. But those are the ones that actually...
So that could be forthcoming, potentially.
Those were the ones that actually got published as far as I know. You know, I'm intermittent with music. I haven't picked up my guitar in a long time. I really need to do that again. But, you know, I think of melodies and song lyrics all the time. And that's very intuitive for me.
Yeah.
You know, I studied piano. I got to a certain point with it before I started having some issues, you know, with note reading. So I have a neurological condition that affects the way I process, you know, highly detailed things sometimes.
Okay.
So, but I had this ear too. So I was also taking guitar lessons, also learning chords and notes, but it got to the point where I was like, I'm just picking up stuff by ear, you know, I can't explain it. Anybody who's ever played stuff by ear, you know, it's unexplainable. You just kind of do it, you know. So I'm always thinking of melodies and lyrics and things. If it had still been lucrative at the time I was laid off from Mattel 2 years ago, I might have tried to, you know, get back up to speed and got some, you know, instruments and equipment together and tried to be a jingle writer. But, you know, jingles are few and far between these days. But yeah, you know, I have a knack for that. You know, it's almost like something I can go to that's like an exercise. You know, it's like exercising your skills where, you know, I'm working all day writing a press release or an email
Yeah.
or a story concept. Well, where do I go when I want to just kind of play with words? And that would be
escape, basically.
Try to write a poem or a haiku or a song lyric,
like a creative, escape, if you will, a creative exercise,
right?
If you will.
And I need to do that more. I need to pick up my guitar again and get back into that. It's kind of like an off to the side thing, but you never know. Like with the things I'm working on now, especially at Minnow, there may be opportunities to come in and provide some lyrics for something.
There you go.
Because I know they're looking to do more things with music. So there's always that. But to me, it's always about storytelling. So if I'm able to tell stories with characters I love that. Or even if I'm able to promote characters or promote stories, that's like the marketing end, but it's still got storytelling embedded in it.
It's
because I'm writing
for the price of one.
I'm writing about stories, and telling the story of that story is a story in itself.
Exactly.
It's two very different types of writing, but somehow I'm able to handle them. So
blending them together.
I've been fortunate.
With what we've covered, and it's from an absolute remarkable journey, remarkable career that you have had. What would you say, Paul, to this point? Putting you on the spot a little bit, but what would you say, actually kind of taking this from two different angles, what would you say had been your greatest challenge throughout that career journey that you encountered?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I don't know. Challenges are every day. Challenges are every project.
Well, true.
There's always a challenge, right?
But did anything ever stick out? Let's say
there's one anecdote I can give you.
Okay.
That is
something
I pulled out.
Please do tell.
I pulled it out a lot in interviews when I was in between jobs, and that's when I was at Mattel, and it turned out to be one of my proudest accomplishments. At Mattel, they had a toy line of these little characters, and when you squeezed their bellies, they would sing a musical note. They would go, ah, ah. And if you had more than one, they would sing in harmony when you squeezed them, and you could make, melodies out of it.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
So they presented this in a meeting, and everybody loved it. And I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, what would we call this? It doesn't look like any known creature, because the way they were designed, they were kind of like animals, but they didn't look like any existing animals. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you think of classic Popeye comic strips and animated cartoons, they have the Jeep character, which it looks like a dog, but it's not a dog, right? Yeah. So that's how these characters were. They kind of looked like animals, but they weren't any animal that you knew. And they kind of looked just like goofy cartoon characters at the same time. So you could look at it and say, well, maybe it doesn't look like an animal. Maybe it's some kind of alien clown or something, or whatever you want to look at. They were very cute and colorful. And I'm looking at them. I'm like, what is this thing? I go, it's some kind of thing. It sings. And it came right in my head. Singamajigs. We're going to call this thing Singamajigs. Because what is it? It's a thingamajig that sings. Right?
Yep. So
I actually wasn't working on that product line. At the time I was managing other copywriters, and one of my writers was working on it. And I went to him, I said, look, put Singamajigs in for trademark search. This is a great name for this. He goes, oh yeah, that sounds good. And so we cleared it through trademark search. And, that was the name for a little bit. And then I was, over the next few months, the toy development process always takes a number of months.
Oh, I could imagine.
I'm off working on my projects. So I'm not privy to what's going on with these characters. Yeah. So, and at one point, my writer who's working on it tells me, oh yeah, remember that thing that you told me to search Singamajigs for? I go, yeah. Right? They're going to release it as burbles. I'm like, what? Burbles? He goes, yeah, well, you know, the VP, one of the VPs of marketing, always wanted to name a toy Burbles. You know, they really pushed for this. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. We cleared Sigma-Jigs. It's the perfect name for this. If it goes out at Burbles, I don't think it'll sell. People will think it's a burping toy or something, or something that gurgles.
Or not have any idea what it is at all. Yeah,
right. And I thought, well, this person's pretty high up, this vice president, and not a person, you know, that I want to upset in any way. Accomplished, you know, long-time executive, you know, toy industry pro. And so I thought, but I had to do something. So I went to their second in command, and I basically made my case to that person. I said, look, I understand how much they want to have a toy called Burbles. And I don't disagree that name shouldn't be used at some point.
Yeah.
It's just not right for this
but
particular
not for that,
toy.
yes. Understood.
I made the case, and I said, this is why Sigma-Jigs works. Like I said to you, it's a thingamajig that sings. And you know, I thought going in,
that it might have been a long shot, yeah.
It's a long shot.
But you had to take the shot regardless.
I'll probably get shot down the next day. I spoke to them. They understand your point. They agree. We're going to go out of Sigma-Jigs.
There you go.
And it became, per the Toy Industry Association of America, it was named the Toy of the Year for 2011.
There you go.
So that's one of my proudest achievements was naming that toy. You know, because it's not every day you can say, yeah, the toy I named was the Toy of the Year for the whole year.
That's incredible. That's incredible, Paul.
And it was a story of, you know, taking a chance, you know, because, you know, you don't necessarily, you don't know. It's kind of, it's uncertain, scary waters.
Exactly.
But it turned out,
it
turned out that, the person was reasonable and saw the point and said, oh, they're right.
The bottom line is you took a shot. You believed in something. You took a shot. You went in with the mindset, possibly a long shot, but you felt so passionate about this that you took the shot. You rolled the dice, and it panned out, and so forth. And you know, I mean, that's kind of a good way that we can sum up life as a whole. You know, we all take shots, you know, in different aspects of our lives. Now, but then you have a lot of folks out there that are always, you know, and understandably in many respects, afraid to take that shot, afraid to roll the dice, afraid to step out of the comfort zone. But, you know, it all, you know, comes down to that, you know, ultimately some of the best things that any of us may accomplish or that are some of the best experiences that we may encounter all underlyingly stem from rolling the dice, taking that shot, regardless of what the odds may seem, you know, stepping out of our comfort zones. That's when we see ultimately some of the best overall results. And the story you just told exemplifies that phenomenon and concept in one of the best ways possible. And, you know, and congratulations and kudos to you on that. And again, I mean, a remarkable career, no question about it. But I also want to touch on, Paul, in addition to this tremendous career successes and accomplishments that we've just chronicled and highlighted, you know, I also want to point out that, you know, you've also been involved with some very interesting and fascinating and wonderful charitable projects. One in particular called Superheroes for Hospice, a charity that puts on comic book shows and mini comic conventions with proceeds going towards the St. Barnabas Hospice facility in Livingston. Tell us about Superheroes for Hospice and some of your other charitable, you know, projects of note that you've been involved in over the years.
Well, Superheroes for Hospice actually is defunct now, but it was running for a few years, and the reason it was running was due to a man named Spiro Ballas, who worked at St. Barnabas Hospice in Livingston, and he was a big comic book collector. He loved comic books, and he wanted to do something to help raise funds for hospice care costs. Because what a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of costs involved just to
I can imagine.
just to help with hospice, just to be a volunteer. You know, well, you know, there's always, you know, gas and tolls if you're taking care of somebody, different things like that, things that you could do to help out the families. So he thought, well, we can have an ongoing fundraiser, right? So I had caught wind of it, and the first thought was, well, it might be a good place to take some, you know, my comic collection and try to sell it off and give some of the money to charity. And then it became more than that. It became, well, how can I help promote it? Can I write press releases and get the word out about it? Can I help get comic book creators, friends of mine that I know, to show up at these events and do autographs? And kind of snowballed from there. So I would volunteer in that capacity, someone to help promote, someone to help get creators on board, and also I would attend and sell comics and autograph things. So all credit due to Spiro, because he was the mastermind behind it. I was just fortunate to be able
to be a part of it, be an integral part of it. Yeah.
You know, at a certain point, another company took over Barnabas, and they had some redundancies. So Spiro, a lot like me, he got laid off. He ended up somewhere else at a different hospice, but I don't think he has really brought that back yet. But I do see him sometimes selling comics at different conventions. I'm not sure, you know, if those are charitable endeavors or not. They may, no, again, they probably are. But I haven't had a chance to dive into it with him. But there's that. Another one I'm really involved with is Kids Comic Con. And this is an initiative that was started by a comic book writer and playwright named Alex Simmons, along with Gene Adams from Bronx Community College. They started it, I think, back in 2007, I think thereabouts. I think I came on board maybe 2 years in, maybe 3. But that initiative, it began as an outreach to the local community in the Bronx. And what they did was they said, let's have a comic convention for kids in this neighborhood who can't afford to go to the big New York City Comic Convention, which is, it's an expensive endeavor to go to New York City Comic Con. You're talking, you know, whether it's coming in by mass transit or driving in, you're going to have ticket expenses, you're going to have toll expenses. If you're driving, you have gas expenses, parking expenses if you drive. So it's kind of prohibitive for a lot of kids living, you know, in more challenged areas. And that was part of it. But the other part is, how do we equip these children with the tools so that they can learn how to express themselves, you know, through the arts? You know, teach them about storytelling, teach them about drawing, teach them about, you know, drawing comic books or painting or creating puppets. And so it's been this wonderful, wonderful thing. There are people who come just about every year that not only comic book professionals, but we have puppeteers that are, you know them, you know their characters. Abby Cadabby on Sesame Street. They're in the big blue house. Well, we have the people who are those characters, who are the puppeteers and do the voices. Noel McNeil. And, you know, this always happens every time I'm on an interview. I blank. Leslie, please forgive me. I'm blanking on your last name as I speak. But Leslie, who does Abby Cadabby. And so...
Sounds wonderful.
It's great. So we've been doing that for years. So I help with that. And for that, I don't even appear, you know, as an artist. I work behind the scenes on that. I help promote it. I help with the planning process. I help run it. It is a once a year in the Bronx event, but it's also more than that because we've done special events with Ronald McDonald House, where we've done a superhero day for them a number of times out in New York City. We have done, kind of the pop-up traveling roadshow version at other comic conventions where we have an area for kids comics. Because the comic book industry is big, and not every comic that you would run across in the comic convention is for kids. Some of them are way adult. So, there's this need to have kids content out there. So we do that. Alex and Gene have traveled to Africa, to other parts of the world, bringing these workshops. They've done online events. It's just an amazing initiative.
That's incredible.
I love being part of that.
That's incredible. Now, Paul, let me ask you, as we move forward, so let me ask, with everything that we have chronicled and covered and touched upon, it's just, again, absolutely remarkable. And I said before, your career obviously is still evolving and ongoing. And granted, this may be tough to answer, and it's okay, but I'm going to throw this out there. What do you see as what's next for Paul Castiglia?
What's next is a lot of the same, honestly. I have these animated episodes coming up soon. I want to do more of that, as well as all my, day job duties at this wonderful company, Minnow. I wouldn't mind doing comics again. There is a potential for me to do what's known as a custom comic book, which is custom comics are like one-shots that are used to promote a company or a product or a cause. And in this case, a friend of mine has reached out. He's trying to get a ham radio aficionado comic book off the ground. So there's an opportunity for that. Comics down the line. I mean, I have to put my job first and foremost.
Oh, naturally, yes.
And so that's my main focus. But, the Scared Silly book, I want to finish writing it. Of course, I always want to do more, speaking. In fact, I am going to be on February 5th speaking at the West Orange Classic Film Festival for the seventh voyage of Sinbad. And that's kind of interesting for me to talk about stepping out of your zone.
Yep.
Because my zone is usually the classic comedies. But they asked me, because we had other plans for Abbott and Costello this year, they asked me, would you do another one? Would you do this one?
Yes.
And I said, you know what? I love stop motion animation. I love Ray Harryhausen. I don't know a lot about him, but I'm going to find out. And the best way to find out is to agree to speak at this. So
Trial by fire.
Trial by fire. We'll see how I do. It's something new for me to try. If I can get back into songs at some point, that'd be great. Like I said, I have my friend working on Friendfish, my friend John Mark, and I want to help him out with that as much as possible. The Scared Silly book, so there are things in progress.
Combination of a lot of irons in the fire.
I have ideas for other books. Once I complete Scared Silly, I don't want to mention them because I don't want anybody to steal my
one step at a time.
I don't want anybody to steal my fire. Scared Silly's taking so long that I wouldn't be surprised if someone ends up beating me to the punch on it. But
I don't think that.
I don't know if they're going to go as in depth as I'm planning to go. But there's things like that. Sometimes I have crazy ideas for screenplays. Maybe that's in my future.
That's the creative mastermind inside you. You're always obviously coming up with new thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, what's next for, like you said, I think you said it the best at the beginning is, all of the same, more of the same, basically a combination of a lot of great projects, irons in the fire, if you will, that you're looking to see come to fruition. And as well as, continue to, kind of monitor new ideas that will continue to just pop into you and how you can maybe, take those ideas to the next level. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and actually, a couple I won't mention these either because they're kind of ideas that are proprietary. But I do have, actually, believe it or not, a couple ideas for entertainment themed restaurants, if you will, kind of gimmicky restaurants. I was hot on it before the pandemic. The pandemic took a lot of the wind out, but now that seems to be coming back again.
Turning a corner.
So it may be time for some of these
revisit that
kind of novelty, is the best way, not gimmick, but novelty type experiences in the food realm or the snack realm.
I can't wait to.
So yeah, that's kind of in my head too. That's a real kind of wild, off.
I wouldn't call it wild
out of
at
left
all.
field.
I think it's a great concept.
Kind of a little out of left field type of thing.
And
another thing I want to mention is, there's a bunch of great guys that I do consulting with, called Odd Frog Entertainment, that are doing some innovative things with toys, and they want to do some neat things with content, and they've been tremendous. They're doing some kind of collectible, customizable vehicle. They're toys, but they're not toys. It's hard to say, but they're coming up with all kinds of cool stuff. So, those guys, I give them advice whenever I can and help out with some stuff. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit different than what I'm used to too. I mean, it's sort of in the toy realm, but it's its own thing as well. So it is always something new. There's always something different.
I love it.
There's always something that may be similar to what I've done in the past, but with a new spin. So
the passionate energy that you have around all of these things, is incredibly inspiring, Paul, to say the least. And I can't wait to see, how all of these things take shape and come to fruition. And now that we've had the opportunity to connect, and we, we're a part of this great, Flying Deuces tent with the International Sons of the Desert, we're going to obviously be seeing a lot of each other. And so I'm going to have a bird's eye view of hearing about how these things, come to fruition. And I can't wait. I'm so excited. It's been a remarkable career. You've had so many wonderful accomplishments, and I'm so happy for you. And I can't wait to see all of these things, get taken to the next level. And I'm so grateful that we've had the opportunity to meet, recently and become friends. And I'm so excited to be able to say that I'm going to witness some of these things happen as they evolve. And Paul, I mean, this has been an absolute pleasure having you a part of this, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us here on Sessa's Corner, chronicle this phenomenal career that you've had, a career that is still wide open and with a lot more to come. Needless to say, But with that said, a part of the tradition of being a part of Sessa's Corner is you cannot wrap up an episode of Sessa's Corner without going through what I call being Sessified. And we're gonna take a moment to kind of get to know a little bit more about Paul Castiglia, beyond the great writing accomplishments and the copy editing and everything that you've heard about, folks. We want to really kind of pinpoint a few key things about Paul. So you're about to be Sessified, Paul. So, get ready and batten down the hatches, as I like to say. God bless the late, great Gorilla Monsoon. I always use that phrase from him. So, Paul, let's get right to it, okay? Favorite movie?
My favorite film of all time is a movie from 1983 called Local Hero, directed by Bill Forsyth, starring Burt Lancaster, Peter Riegert, and Dennis Lawson. It's a beautiful, wonderful, sly, understated comedy with a little bit of kind of fantasy overtones, maybe. It takes place partly in Texas and mostly in Scotland in a little fishing village.
I've never seen it.
And it's just a wonderful, delightful film. I knew it from the time I saw it when I was a junior in high school when it first came out.
Okay.
I knew that day, this is my favorite movie of all time, and it's never been...
I'm going to have to check that out.
It's never been supplanted. I'll have to lend you the 4K restoration.
Oh, yeah, please do. I want to check that out. It's a
great film.
Oh, excellent. Favorite actor and favorite actress?
Okay, well, man, I love so many actors.
As do I.
When this question comes up, I kind of take all the comedians and the monsters out of it because they're like on their own special plane of existence.
Separate platform.
But then I still have a problem because I like a lot of character actors. How do I even answer this? Like Cary Grant is phenomenal as an actor, as a leading man, and as a comedian. But then there's people like Claude Rains, who's also phenomenal as an actor, as a leading man, and a character actor. Yep. So
the Invisible Man.
Where do you go? Like, I love all those guys. I think lately I've been getting into Warren Oates a lot. So a more recent name, because there's something in his performances, I can't pinpoint it, but there's something that I'm responding to there. But yeah, I'm never going to be able to pin it down to one.
That's okay.
One, and it's the same. It's the same with actresses. But if I'm thinking about actors, I'm going to answer it this way. This is how I'm going to answer this.
Go ahead.
I'm going to make this very specific. Taking actors from the past, and if you were to pluck them out of the past and drop them into a movie today, and they acted the same way, they would still feel contemporary even in 2023. And to that, I say the honors would have to go to Van Heflin. Van Heflin, pardon me. And an actress called Cleo Moore, who only made a handful of films, and most of them were in the film noir genre. And there's something about them that they're just in the moment.
Yeah.
And like I said, you could put them in there today and they would still be in the moment. So that's how I'm going to answer it today.
That's fine. That's fine.
There's billions of actors and actresses.
Oh, of course. I know it's tough. And I'm sure the next one might be as equally tough, but we're going to take a stab at it. And just, do your best. Favorite musician?
Fats Waller is probably my favorite from the period of Jump and Jive. If I'm in rock and roll, my favorite rock band is The Replacements.
Okay.
And my favorite songwriter is the leader of that group, Paul Westerberg.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And favorite song overall?
Favorite song? Wow. Favorite song. If I go back again to like that classic jaunty era, there's a song called The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea. And I've listened to hundreds of versions of that song. George Harrison even recorded it on his final album. I really love that song. And I think it goes back to the 1920s or 30s. It's just a great lyric and a great melody. If we bring it up to contemporary times, In My Life by the Beatles is just a beautiful, beautiful song. Yeah. I love the Beatles, so.
Great. Excellent. Favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show? Okay.
I know a lot to choose from, but.
Yeah, it's tough. If I were to pick a comedy, if I bring it down to the realm of comedy, which is mostly the type of TV shows I watch, I'd probably say Fawlty Towers. But it's like a close second being The Honeymooners. Any Abbott Costello show, of course. There's too many. Now I'm going to start going down a rabbit hole of a lot of names.
I got you.
Let's say Fawlty Towers.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And last and certainly not least, Paul, perhaps this is a lot easier. Favorite food?
Favorite food? I like food. I need to lose weight again. My weight goes up and down. I don't ever want to be on death row. And my biggest fear in life is being falsely accused. So hopefully I'll never be in that position. But if it comes down to that, it's going to be a cheeseburger, a piece of pizza, and some chocolate ice cream.
All right. Well, you covered 3 of the most popular quote-unquote food groups there. So there you go. Excellent, Paul. Listen, I tell you, this has been a joy, to say the least. And again, I cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to take time away from your very busy, demanding, schedule with Minnow and everything, all the projects and everything that you're still working on. I cannot thank you enough for giving me, this time today. And,
It's an honor for me that you would consider me for this.
Oh, it's
I don't,
my privilege.
I do what I do because I love what I do, but I don't see myself from the other side. So to me, I'm always surprised if anybody wants to talk to me.
Listen, you've had a remarkable career, and to hear you tell your story of how it originated, and how it came to where it is, where you've been, and where you are today is great to listen to, remarkable to listen to, and incredibly inspiring. So,
And I appreciate it. And my whole thing has always been to do what I love and to make an impact, especially on kids. Make them feel that there was something in a story that either made them laugh or touched them or inspired them. That's always most important to me. It's not about me. That's why, I always say,
of course,
I look at it like, if I could do that, then I'm a blessed man. And it, again, to bring it back to, I've had the opportunities. I don't want to be a superstar. I think I left that behind in 7th or 8th grade. I'm going to be famous, and I'm kind of known in certain circles, but that's not why I do this. And I don't care if I'm not known.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm at that point where I'm like, no, it's a joy and a privilege and an honor to be able to do this and to help, lift somebody's spirits or inspire them or wherever it is. So that's what I got.
I couldn't agree more. I share the same sentiment. There's nothing like making, people happy, especially children. And I get to do it in various ways in my life. And, you spoke about your passion, and you do what you love, and it all, we can certainly summarize all of this by saying, and folks, you've all heard this, but it bears repeating all the time. If we're all blessed with the opportunity to do something we love, none of us will work a day in our life. And, that's what it comes down to. Once again, folks, Paul Castiglia, writer extraordinaire, a tremendous career with so much more to come. Please stay tuned and because I know that this is, there's a lot more to come from this very talented gentleman to my left here. Thank you again, Paul. Much appreciated. Folks, once again, thank you so much for welcoming me back on my YouTube channel, Anthony M. Sessa. A lot more new episodes of Sessa's Corner are in the works. Of course, to check out this episode and all of the past episodes of Sessa's Corner, please check out my channel on YouTube under Anthony M. Sessa. If you have not already done so, please subscribe. Please get your family and friends to subscribe as well. Please share accordingly. And again, a lot more to come. Paul, again, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And Paul, listen, a little salute here. Thank you once again, my friend. Just keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
And you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.